And with that, welcome everyone to Moonshot by TechCabal. These are conversations for Moonshot by TechCabal. My name is Timi Odreso, and I am a senior editor at TechCabal. And very briefly, over the next 1 hour, we'll be talking about how to maximize AI's potential in Africa. But before we get into that, let's just talk about what we're doing here, or what even Moonshot is. Now, Moonshot Conversations is a mini series of discussions about some of the most critical problems in African tech and what radical solutions for these problems look like. The focus of this conversation is to discuss AI in Africa, its impact, and use cases, as well as the challenges faced in building AI tools for the African continent. This event is part of the programs preceding and heralding our new flagship conference, Moonshot by TechCabal. The conference, which holds in October, will gather the most audacious player in Africa's tech industry. And this event is organized by TechCabal Insights, the events, research, and data analytics arm of TechCabal. I'm saying TechCabal a lot, but yeah, TechCabal Insights is an African-focused digital economy consultancy that leverages big data to help startups, investors, operators, big tech companies, governments, and other ecosystem players on and off the continent to answer specific questions and implement key interventions. And today, what Moonshot and TC Insights have got for us is a conversation on AI. And basically, everyone who's on this call knows what we're talking about when we talk about AI. It's from Siri to things like ChatGPT, everybody's implementing AI in their business. We've seen a boom in conversations on AI, in services that are implementing AI in their business. And we basically don't need to define AI. But how does it affect us as a continent? What does AI look for? Because again, implementing AI in Africa is going to be way different from implementing it in other regions. So what does that implementation look like? What are the potentials for us in Africa? And that's what we're going to be talking about here. And with me, I have 5 wonderful guests, and well, like they're super brilliant in their own ways, and they're going to talk about the potentials of AI in Africa. And first off, we have Oluwasanmi Akinmusire. Somi is the co-founder and chief operations officer at ImaliPay. He has over 15 years experience, having worked in telecoms, energy, fintech, gaining vast experience in commercial operations management. He has also worked at MTN, Samsung, and Cellulant. Welcome, Somi. Good morning. It's afternoon in Kenya, yeah? It's already afternoon on your side.
Thank you, Timmy. Good afternoon. Happy to be here.
Good afternoon. All right. Next, we have Tamilore Oladipo. Tamilore is a content marketer with experience creating content across several industries, including B2B services, health tech, and no-code tools. She currently works on the marketing team at Buffer, a leading marketing software company. Hi, Tammy. Welcome and good morning. You're in Lagos.
Yes.
Morning. Okay. Next, we have Oluwabunmi Borokini. Bumi is the program's lead at Immersive Tech Africa, where she spearheads the democratization of immersive technology across the continent. She is a seasoned professional with over 6 years of experience in the edtech space, leveraging technology to enhance educational experiences. She has a diverse background in both product development and management. Hi, Bumi. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, Timmy. Good to be here.
Sorry we couldn't figure out your video, but I'm sure that it's going to pop up.
No, I think it's up now.
Oh, it's up now.
Yeah,
all right.
it is.
Hi. Okay.
Hi.
I had the screen minimized on the list here so I could go over the agenda.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. And last but not least, we have Tawanda Ewing. Now, Tawanda is an electronic engineer turned data and machine learning engineer who has a love for science and a passion for uplifting the African continent. He believes that science and technology have the power to transform the narrative about our continent by solving some of our biggest challenges. Tawanda isn't here with us right now, but he has actually just joined. Hi, Tawanda.
Hi, Timmy.
Nice to have you.
Glad to be here.
Good morning. All right. Before we jump into the conversation, I'm just going to quickly go over the agenda and what we'll be doing over the next 1 hour. So what I've done now, the 5 minutes I've spent now, and then we're doing an introduction where we basically just talk about what we're going to do on the conversation and we introduce the guest. For the next 25 to 30 minutes, we're going to have a conversation with our panelists, and we're just going to throw them questions about the potentials of AI in Africa. During that 25 minutes, if you have any questions for our guests, if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can put them in the chat box. And my colleague, Victoria Olaonikwekun, who is a events associate at TechCabal, will just pick up the comments and tell you what to do. But you can introduce yourself in the comment section. You can ask questions, but please remember to keep it civil. And after we have a conversation for 30 minutes, we'll have a 25 minutes Q&A session where our guests will have the chance to answer all your questions. And if you want, and if you are able to, you can also come up live to the stage to ask your questions. And then we'll have a 5 minutes closing remarks from everyone. So thanks again, everyone, for spending time with me today. I'll just jump into the right question, the first question. And this is to you, Tawanda. What are the interesting use cases of AI and why are investors betting on it?
Thanks, Timmy. So yeah, I think that's a very good question. When you look at the interesting use cases of AI, I think particularly in an African context, we need to look at like automation. I think for me, that's one of the major things. Like there's a lot of tasks that we do, whether it's actual physical tasks or it's some sort of software task that perhaps we don't always have maybe the necessary skills available. A lot of the skilled talent tends to drift away from Africa. But I think AI is giving us an opportunity to actually take skills, which is that intelligence, and package it into something that can be applied to situations. So now you have people that may not have the capabilities to do certain things. Suddenly it's more accessible, right? I think ChatGPT is an excellent example of that. You can see how it's sort of democratized intelligence, where you don't necessarily need to know something or be a specialist in something. At least something like ChatGPT or these generative models gives you a head start into actually being able to do some of these things. You ask it a question, it gives you a very concise answer that you can then use and apply in a practical way. So I think that's what's very interesting for investors. They're seeing the opportunities for basically accelerating any type of tasks using AI. And again, I think at this point, it's not necessarily about replacing the human beings, but giving them tools that help them accelerate their workflow. And naturally, for any organization, that affects your bottom line, and that automatically boosts profits in some way or form. So I think the answer to the question is probably around being able to accelerate tasks is a good use case. For now, it's limited to software, or can I say soft skills, but I'm sure with time goes on, as the hardware starts to catch up, we'll have a lot more automation in terms of physical tasks as well. You can imagine in agriculture and how that can speed things up in there.
I'm going to throw the same question to Favour. Favour, as someone who is studying this, you're studying AI, you've seen interesting use cases over there. What do you think are the use cases for us here in Africa? I mean, we've seen about 682 million pumped into AI on the continent so far. So what interesting use cases are there today?
Thank you. I think I agree with Tawanda that a very interesting use case is automation. I really like the idea of technology and how it can help people flourish, and how it can promote social cohesion and prosperity. So I think that's a very interesting way that AI can help people in Africa is to, I suppose, suffer less, stress less, convert energies into doing tasks or talents and activities that are more beneficial, that promotes relaxation. That's something that I really see AI being able to help us achieve. In this way, AI is no different from other technologies, but the challenge, I think, will be trying to find balance between productivity, which really at the cost of enjoyment and relaxation and human welfare, versus pure profit making. So I think that the main use case that I find most interesting is how AI can help people engage more with what is worthwhile, with their families, with their friends, with the future, and less with repetitive, monotonous tasks, bullshit jobs, essentially.
Okay, yeah, so engage more with their family, even engage more with work and everything. But we're seeing that there's low adoption rates, even though we know that, I mean, of course, you can complete, for example, students can complete their project work using AI faster. But why is there low adoption rates in Africa? Let me not even presume that there's low adoption for AI. Is there a low adoption rates for AI in Africa, and what are the challenges that exist for the adoption rate at all? And I want Tammy and Somi to answer this question, but I'll throw it to Tammy first.
Well, AI doesn't have a low adoption rate in my house because I use it. It's I have like a user's perspective more than like a technical or global perspective, but it has really enhanced my work. So for me, there's no low adoption rates, but I think generally if we consider the reality of Africa, I can only speak to Nigeria. I don't really know what's happening in the rest of our continent, but considering that low literacy rates, poor governance, and lack of infrastructure are things we're still struggling with, I think that I guess low adoption kind of also like depends on how you think about it. So Google has AI baked into it. How many people use Google on a daily basis? So many tools are adopting AI. So in that sense, like people who use the internet are inadvertently using AI. But in terms of like and understanding the education of like what these tools are, how they impact like the information that you're served, whether they have the right cultural context, whether you should be using them for in your like, because I know that like bias and things like that are still things that we're struggling with a lot of the AI tools that are consumer facing. So like language learning models like ChatGPT. So yeah. Low adoption is it depends. And I hate that answer so much, but yeah, not for me. But I think that considering the tools that already have it baked into it versus the low literacy rates on the continent, there probably is low adoption rates. Yeah, practically. Yeah, that's right.
Somi, back to you now. At ImaliPay, you guys are using AI and big data for finance. So do you think there's low adoption rates? What are the challenges for adoption on the continent?
Thanks. I agree with Tammy. That question is quite relative because adoption can be at the consumer level, at the business level. And again, when you look at it, just like Tammy said, a lot of people are using AI and they don't know they're using it. You're typing an email on Google and it makes a suggestion as to how to complete a sentence. Those are the basic levels of AI and people use those things and don't know it. But to answer you, yes, Africa can do a lot more around AI. And some of the challenges that we have around that would be around, just like Tammy said, infrastructure, hardware, data, because AI feeds on data, right? And then talent, right? And like Tawanda said, I believe Tawanda said this, a lot of our talents are moving out of the continent. And yes, as you rightly said, we use AI for credit decision making and helping to create a more accurate profile on customers that take credit from institutions that we provide our services to. And we've done that on a consumer, on a B2C level, and now we do that on a B2B level. Now, the truth is a lot more businesses in Africa can adopt AI. And I can see that a lot more organizations have started to think about it. Just yesterday, I challenged somebody in the organization to say, when you do your pitch decks, do you push it through ChatGPT to criticize it? You know what I mean? Just take a look at it. There's a lot we can do with these things. But to answer you, Africa is also doing a lot to catch up. I have to tell you this. I mean, of course, you know the investment in InstaDeep, which is the largest, investment anywhere on the continent, takeover on the continent. And that's really, really interesting. But then look at the governments. Usually our governments in Africa like to come last on these matters, but it's very interesting to know that there was a Smart Africa Alliance that was done in 2014 that had 32 African countries sign up to it, and it was basically to tackle the issues of technology and particularly AI. And when you start to think of the fact that countries like Rwanda have invested or are planning to invest over $72 million to just make their city, that country as a whole, but legally, Kigali as a start, make it smart. You start to know that on this matter, there are some right moves happening across the continent. So yes and no. Yes, that's, from a consumer point of view, we can do more. But I would say that businesses have started to adopt this a bit more. Maybe we can do better. And then the governments are not being left behind, and they've started to make moves on this. So it's relative, just like Tammy said.
I do want to talk about the government's involvement a bit, but I'll hold that for Favour because I know that that's her specialty. But I want to throw a question to Bumi now. Now we've talked about how businesses and even individuals can do better. But as someone who, I mean, you work in programs, so you're at intersection of policy, you're at the intersection of businesses and individuals. So what are the skills and the key skills and competencies that need to be developed in African populations if we're going to, adequately leverage AI technology?
All right, thank you, to me. Right, so the skills and competencies that need to be developed in African populations. First and first, right, I think we need to look at our domain, right? The domain we really want to implement artificial intelligence in. And I think one very common domain I think we've been exploring in AI would be healthcare, I think education, then you have agriculture. So it's just domain knowledge, having people really know the different domains that artificial intelligence can be used, really important. So majority of populations in Africa would just think, oh, I can always use ChatGPT, query ChatGPT, gives me response, and forgetting the fact that there are other domains, right? We have health, we have education, we have transportation. So we really need to be able to increase that part, the knowledge base for Africa. Then in terms of technical skills, of course, there's been a lot of debate around artificial intelligence taking our jobs and all. Well, it takes some jobs, but creates more, right? So in terms of technical skills, we have like a whole lot of skills that we need to, start looking into, and that's the AI engineer. I think we have, sorry, pardon me, I can't picture your name, right? We have an AI engineer here, right? I think as that probably 6 years ago in Africa, I don't think we had something called AI engineer. We only had software developer, and they were just general to building applications. So we have, in fact, prompt engineer, like what is prompt engineer, right? Tammy was talking about, yeah, she uses AI a lot, so she can even say, yeah, she's a prompt engineer, right, Tammy? So like it's a whole lot. There are different, skills that we need to start looking into, yeah, for artificial intelligence. And I've just mentioned two out of like a whole lot. Then you will now see you now want to start looking out for even data guys, data engineers, right? How you clean your data, because it's really important for artificial intelligence space. You would also even want to start see, I think even all technologies are interrelated when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we can't even just stop at, oh, we need data. We also need to also consider our cloud, right? How we store data and how they're accessible across board, right? So if I'm in Rwanda, right, someone in Nigeria should be able to access my data, probably to be able to, test for a particular use case. So basically, like there are all lots of skills that needs to be looked into.
So I'm going to draw you back to something you said about
job
markets and everything. So what I mean, already, Somi already talked about this a bit. We're already seeing implications of job markets and everything. We're already seeing that already there's a brain drain existing. So now, what are the implications of AI on the job market, and how can countries prepare for it? You already mentioned that it creates more jobs, but how can countries make sure that people are actually ready to take these jobs? I mean, we already have the talent scarcity for engineering itself on the continent. So I just want Bumi and Tawanda to maybe dig into this a bit. Yeah.
Okay. Will Tawanda wants to go first? I think I can leave the floor for Tawanda. I just finished talking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's very important to consider in our context, and in terms of preparing for the imminent AI disruption that we're in already, right? I think AI has been around for a while, but I think with the generative models arriving on the scene, they've really supercharged everything, and it's just a panic now. Governments are scrambling to create policies. Organizations are trying to see where they can plug in AI, and I think the everyday worker is already concerned. Everyone's just panicking, like, okay, so what does this mean for my job? I can only imagine what it's like to be an accountant or someone like that in university right now. You haven't even gotten your degree yet, but it's already looking like your job might be irrelevant. But what I can say is that we might find that in this rush, it's going to be a lot more difficult to sort of plug and play AI into our organizations and completely replace humans. I am a strong believer in that AI is less of a replacement, but more of an augmentation, right? It will augment how we work. So there's this saying that's going around right now where AI won't replace your job, but someone who uses AI well, right? On the African continent, we don't, the types of jobs that will be affected currently by these generative models, which are like the high level service jobs, creating content, being able to handle customer interaction, stuff like that. We don't have a massive industry to disrupt in that sense, right? There are a lot of people that work in those industries, but it's not as massive as the so-called developed nations. So for us, it's actually a way to leverage this technology, actually build up those industries with AI at the core, right? So we will, in a sense, we have an opportunity to sort of leapfrog how things were being done, where in developed nations, they have sort of rework their infrastructure. We have an opportunity to actually build up that infrastructure with AI at its core, right? And then focus on upskilling our individuals to actually take advantage of that. So I think the opportunity there is to, this will be something that has to happen at the government level, but I think at a personal level, we can start to think about if you have children that are growing up right now, I mean, get them into AI, let them interact with something like ChatGPT so that they're aware that this is what's possible right now, right? It will make them think about the kind of decisions they'll make in terms of their career. And I think all in all, the net good that comes from this for the continent is going to be pretty high. There will be some disruptions, 100%. But I think if we just start to, I guess, dip our toes into the waters of AI, then we'll find that it can help us along the way in a lot of things. And it's less of a threat for our economies as it is for so-called more developed economies.
Favour?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Bumi.
Oh, all right, yeah. So myself and Favour, we do have the same surname, right?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. So speaking to transitioning, right? I think we are currently in that phase, trying to really transition. We're trying to really know in Africa, right, what really is AI for us. How do we start implementing and all of that? So one major base for us transition would be infrastructure, right? Just as just rightly said, we need to start looking at infrastructure. That's the base to, now building on. We need to really get our infrastructures right. And also, I think government, they really need to be able to start imputing into our curriculums AI. I don't know how many universities have AI as a core course. I don't know. I'm not aware of that. Probably University of Ibadan might have something related to that. But we really need to start investing in AI education and training programs. Then another key thing would be we need to start equipping our workforce, right? So a normal admin officer should also be able to, understand really what artificial intelligence is. So I think, creating policies around organizations, having trainings in these areas would also go a long way, outside of the old school curriculum, secondary school curriculum being changed, primary school. I think we also need to start looking at our organizations. The list of persons in organizations should be able to go through basic AI training, at least get to understand what artificial intelligence is, how you can implement the artificial intelligence, how you can use it, how you can query it, and all of that. I think that's like a start to our transitioning process in Africa.
Thank you very much for that, Bumi. And in talking about transition, we obviously know that regulations and policies are a really big part of that. I mean, we've seen businesses fail and succeed just because a law was put into place one day. So I'm going to come to Favour and Sami now. Are there specific regulatory frameworks or policies that need to be put in place to ensure, responsible and ethical AI use in Africa? Or even let's leave responsible and ethical. Let's just talk about what regulatory frameworks need to exist in order for AI to actually thrive in Africa.
Ladies first.
So I think that, to begin with, I would like to approach this question by saying that African countries need to think about what they want to get out of AI. So a lot of my co-panelists have spoken about the benefits of AI and how lots of African countries are signing up to agreements to ensure that African countries become smart. But we need to think about what we want to get out of it. I've noticed a trend with many African countries where when something is trending, like be it cryptocurrency or blockchain, lots of government agencies suddenly start issuing out policies and white papers, and then they hurry to ban some of them, and sometimes they hurry to set up these small agencies
Committees.
Committees, yes, exactly, to say that they want to accelerate it, but there isn't like a coherent long-term plan. How many African countries can say that within 20 years, we want 50% of our population, 75% of our population, we want young people in secondary school and primary school to graduate with basic computer literacy. We want them to be able to feed this into the economy. We want to be able to purchase and use homegrown products and services within the country. We don't want to have to hire foreign contractors from Europe, and we want this to feed back into our digital economy in order to ensure that there is increased employment for young people and there is increased productivity. The absence of that coherent vision and plan in the long term is one major challenge. So I think we need to make policies and stick to them that ensure that we are able to do this, first of all, and we need to balance this out with a careful consideration of the risks of technology. Technology always disrupts processes. It always leads to losses in livelihood. The Luddite movement that happened in Europe when factory owners decided to begin to replace hand millers with machinery is an example of this, and is an early example of this, right? So how, in addition to loss of employment, what about equality, social equality, economic equality? How are we ensuring that we are reskilling people? I heard this story, a very popular CEO, tech CEO in Nigeria, said something about when he wanted to launch his fintech in Nigeria, how bank tellers in Nigeria, apparently they have a union, they wanted to go on strike to protest fintech adoption in Nigeria because obviously they knew that it would affect them in some way. And I'm not really sure how this particular individual worked with government agencies to deal with these threats, but I feel that there's something there that speaks to how people need to be reskilled. If I am going to lose my job to somebody who knows how to use AI, then I am going to lose my job, right? But what am I going to do? How will I feed my family? Could I be reskilled? Could the government set up educational retraining programs for people at a certain level for, let's say, 5 years? And then at the end of this period, you get your job back and you begin to work to train other people. There are all sorts of things. And I think there also needs to be strong data protection regulations, as I think Sami mentioned. AI products, machine learning algorithms rely very much on data. And there's a huge problem with the fact that data in Nigeria is, well, a lot of it is inaccessible or is siloed with some company or the other, or government agencies charge you ridiculous amounts of money to be able to access them, or they just don't exist, right? But even the pieces of data that do exist and that are accessible, it's becoming increasingly common to hear that some data broker, the telecoms company, or one app you signed up on has sold your information to somebody. Yeah, exactly. So then we need to work on data protection regulation and just strengthen our judicial institutions, right? And have a stronger respect for the rule of law, essentially.
Tommy, you're already in AI and you already have a fintech. So I'm sure you have quite a bit to explain about policies and regulations.
Oh, yes. And thanks, Timmy. Favour already said most of the things, a lot of things. I'll try not to repeat those things, and all those points are quite relevant. Maybe just to start from, just make a point on the last note around data that she mentioned. The problem with data on this continent is siloed and fragmented. Nigeria, AI needs data. It needs to be fed with data. It's what it lives and thrives on, because the machine learning part of AI will not improve or will not change or grow if we don't feed it the right level of data. And like Faith said, for instance, in Nigeria, open banking is there, but it's not living up to the reputation. It's an example of data that should be open source and should be used for certain things. But you still find, for instance, that certain institutions hold on to customer data and think it's their data, but actually that data belongs to the customer. So in terms of data, we need to kind of make that more fluid. But yes, like you said, data protection, extremely important, and we need to keep an eye on that. But I'd rather speak a bit around policy and things like that. It looks like right now, the AI is not regulated across the world, but the truth is some countries have actually started making moves around that. Now, it may not exist under an entity called, for instance, for financial services, is Central Bank of Nigeria and all. But for instance, I'll use the US as an example. The US is currently formally or informally regulating AI through federal and state structures. The US is, states in the US are strong enough to make policies and regulations that are binding by themselves, that do not have to bind at a federal level. Now, for instance, at the federal level, the Federal Trade Commission in the US is protecting consumers from AI companies that say they can do things that they cannot do. So they have guides around that to say you can't say you do something, or your company can do something, or your product can do something when it cannot do it. It's also not, you also have to be very careful to go out there and say, I'm the best AI for this. They will come after you and come and verify that statement, right? So these are steps in the direction of, regulating AI. Another thing is the guidance also speaks to the fact that if you're an AI company, and you are using AI to offer any form of solution out there, then you must know end-to-end the risks involved with the solution that you are putting out there. And that can be validated and that can be audited. Now, the Federal Trade Commission is not set up to guide, to regulate AI, but as part of what they do right now, they're keeping an eye on it. What are we likely to see in the future? We're likely to see the US create an entity specially just for AI. But they're not there yet. Now, what else do we know? We know that, for instance, New York has an AI regulation around the usage of using automated engines, that are guided by AI to make employment decisions. Isn't that interesting? So what I'm trying to say is it's fragmented, but it's a step in the right direction. And for us on the continent in Africa, these are things that we can leverage from the Western world, countries that have gone ahead of us, to say what is a start point at regulating AI. What are we likely to see in future? We're likely to see, every country, even regions like the European Union, come up with one entity that is focused on just making sure AI is safe for everyone. But that may still be sometime in the future. What am I trying to say? Africa can learn a bit from those countries that are ahead of us, just like we've always done in most of our regulation. Like Faith said, though, we just can't take it hook, line, and sinker. We always have to look at how do we implement this into our own society in a way that makes sense for our people. So I would just like to say, she's mentioned everything around infrastructure, around talent, around things like that. And I'll just basically focus this on what the government needs to do just to be ready to take advantage of this exciting future that we have ahead of us. Back to you.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that Somi mentioned, very critical, of course, is that we can't take all these regulations hook and sinker. And it's because ethical considerations might differ from place to place. Of course, there are general ones, but what might be ethical for us, or what we might need to watch out for, what we might need to focus on, is very, very different from what everyone else needs to focus on. And to Tammy, I'm just going to ask one final question before we move into the Q&A box. Are there any ethical considerations or risk associated with AI deployment in Africa, and how can they be mitigated?
I think AI is more right now risk than, if we're talking about risk, it is like chock full of risks. One example that is relevant to me and that comes to mind immediately is that generative models are not being built on the African continent, so they are inevitably biased. There are many people who have published articles and papers and perspectives on how, when asked, the people who are more likely to be discriminated against in you mentioned the job. I think it was Sami that or Favour that mentioned that some companies were using AI to make decisions, moral decision making, for example. And these are some of the things that immediately make me, so I use AI personally, but for Africa, I don't know if we're quite there yet to use AI to make like decisions, especially when it comes to like how we relate with each other, because a lot of countries don't have protections for their people. Nigeria is a perfect example of how we see these things every day. People get away with the worst crimes that like shouldn't be spoken about in like any public spaces, and then you want to bring in a machine to make decisions that wasn't built with that context in mind. So it just feels like a disaster waiting to happen to implement AI, when sometimes in some institutions that may not be ready for it. The police comes to mind. It has at least generative models. So I don't know much about like health care, how it's being applied in healthcare, but with like language learning models, decision-making models, I don't think we're there yet. And that's one of the things that makes me hesitant, because if I'm worried that like the moral looseness of some of our institutions may be made worse by AI. Cultural context is something that I keep coming back to, because these tools were not created by us, and people are trying to make them make decisions for us. So I think with that in mind, I'm sure there is someone in Africa somewhere developing like an open AI type GPT, whatever. So I'm hoping that that will be the one that will be more widely adopted. And I'm hoping that people like, the people on this panel will be involved in decision making when it comes to how AI should be implemented. But yeah, I see more risk than no risk, or like problems and not no problems when it comes to AI being implemented in Africa. Yeah, I'm very pessimistic in that regard. So I hope I'm wrong. Yes, that's my final.
I know that Justin Irabo already has sort of a test for something similar to what ChatGPT has, and it's called Kainene von Savant. So it's basically ChatGPT for Africans, and it answers questions in that context. So I don't know how wide it is, how widely developed it is yet, but I know that there are already existing models that people are developing on the ground. So we have about 11 questions in the Q&A, and I'm just going to pick the very first, because high class and educated people. What about the 50-year-old man or woman with 3 children living on $1 a day in toxic slum environments in African cities? Does anyone want to go for that?
I think I can take that question. So a good use case, I think, for situations like that is that, yes, you're very right. I think right now there is a lot of focus of AI to service customers that are in the middle to upper class, because companies are trying to figure out how to become profitable. We live in this economic system where profit is important. You can come up with an idea, it's good, it helps, but if you're not making a profit, it won't survive. It's the fuel for the engine that you need to run. In terms of creating AI to help individuals that are in a situation like the question is describing there, where someone's in a slum, they don't really have necessary infrastructure to help them use AI or anything like that. I can give like one use case that I've seen that was pretty interesting. There's a client we've been working with in my organization where they're developing a chat-based shopping system. So the solution that they're working on is that you can't always expect people with the low skill levels to go online and shop confidently. because there's a lot of barriers there. But if you bring that experience to a chat platform, so now you're talking to a robot and you're like, hey, I need to get diapers and I can't find them. Is there anywhere nearby where I can get them? And you're sort of doing the online experience, but through a chat. And what they're doing is that they're using translation in between. So you can ask these questions in your own native language, and then it'll come back with suggestions to be like, okay, here's a location nearby to you. This is the cost of the diapers. You can ask certain questions about the quality of the product and whatnot. So again, it's not necessarily the complete grassroots level of people in the slums, but at least people that have, you have a few dollars and you want to find the best place to get a product where you usually walk around and try and look for something visually. Now you can go and chat, talk to something on WhatsApp, and you can get information back in your own language to help you find something. So, I mean, those are the kinds of solutions that we can use to sort of like, I guess, lower down the barrier of entry for using some of these products that already exist. And I think AI has a huge part to play in doing stuff like that.
Does anyone else want to contribute, or should we move to the next one? Okay, Favour has a hand up.
I also want to say that there's this huge tech solutionist thing where lots of people believe that technology is the answer. I don't think AI is directly the solution to poverty in Africa, but it could be a tool that governments who are responsible for welfare, public welfare, could employ in their plans and in their strategies, and to ensure that wealth is better distributed in Nigeria or in many parts of Africa, right? So if we are talking about how AI is going to help us automate lots of things, this ought to mean that work will become easier to do and that there will be increased productivity. And this ought to mean then that the increased productivity should mean that there are more resources that can be directed towards the people that the person who has this question posed, the poor woman who is living in a slum, the little children, these profits and the benefits that we reap through the use of AI can be redirected to assist people and increase welfare services, essentially.
Thank you for that, Favour. A poll is for all the participants. Just before I move to Sunny, a poll is going to come up on your screen in a couple of minutes. It's basically us asking you what we can do better, how we can make sure these conversations are more impactful, and what next you guys want to read or watch. Sami, yes, you have your hands up.
I was just going to say very briefly that I suspect that in Africa, you are most likely going to feel the impact of AI positively along the lines of health, agriculture, credit before it takes your job. And we're hoping that, before we get to the point where it starts taking people's jobs, people realize that change will come and change will happen and start to position themselves in the right place. Of course, in most cases, we need the help of government, and we hope that as we go forward into the future, not just Nigeria, but the continent, we start to have more responsible governance, which will help people get there. But I'm saying that we're already feeling the impact of AI right now in health. We're already feeling that impact in access to finance. We're feeling it around agriculture, and people should probably consider those positives and see, and hopefully it will encourage them to start to prepare for when we start to say, robots are doing our jobs. Just wanted to add that quickly.
Okay. So Toby has a question here that says, how do we ensure that we keep human well-being at the center of future AI use cases in Africa? We make sure that profits are not put over people. Does anyone want to take that? Okay, Favour.
So my answer to this question will sort of, Tammy said a lot in her last response that actually addresses this. There are lots of harmful use cases, and I think Somi also mentioned this as well, in that we can already see in more developed climes. We see facial recognition, the use of AI to implement surveillance systems that harm people, inaccurate facial recognition technology being used to sentence people to jail, for instance, or even recently, I've been hearing that people who are involved in certain law cases have been banned from going into shopping malls because whoever is involved with the case is also the owner of the shopping mall or the venue that they're trying to enter. And so due to the fact that facial recognition cameras have been deployed in these settings, there's already a sort of an X on their heads, and so they are restricted from going into certain places. And these are just private companies that are restricting access to people in this way. I suppose we have to think about if this is legal or if this supports and preserves people's privacy and people's dignity. So I think to do this, we need to hear from the marginalized, right? We need to hear from the people who are most likely to be affected. There are harmful use cases, the use of generative AI to create deepfake pornography, for instance, which disproportionately impacts women and female politicians, female journalists, but also just ordinary actors and actresses, even musicians. My friend was telling me that he knows of people who are now just typing into ChatGPT that it should generate lyrics in the style of Ashake or something.
And Grammy is banning all those from our word section.
It did not even occur to me that this is something that people could do, but that's because I'm not an artist, right? I don't make music. So people who are involved in this, teachers would know better how this would affect them, and actors and artists and healthcare professionals or whoever is involved will know better how the deployment of AI will impact them. So this points to the need for multi-stakeholder involvement in the design of policies. I also think that governments need to, and founders, tech companies need to have something like the corporate social responsibility, but also an office or an official, somebody in charge of responsible innovation that helps them think about the risks and how they can offset these risks and embed better transparency and accountability in their systems, essentially.
I think Bumi wants to answer a question in the we have, but she also wants to talk. So Bumi, you have the stage.
Yeah, thank you, Timmy. Yeah, so I just wanted to say something about Toby's question around how do we put human well-being at the center of the future AI use case in Africa. So I think one of the discussions that we've been having around AI. I'm currently having a course on artificial intelligence, and usually get to that point where I'm sure Favour also has that, probably one of our modules where you get to talk about ethical artificial intelligence, right? Where we're talking about an artificial intelligence system needs to be accountable, right? So for every algorithm that you would want to use in your system, right, you should be able to explain it, like explain what your algorithm looks like for whatever use case it is that you want to work with. So I think that's like one area I feel that we can always put the human, like we need to be human centric about our use cases, right? Is to ensure that our AI systems are accountable, right? We're also able to explain algorithms being used. So this makes it really fair, for the human race, basically. So that's like my heart for Toby's question, right? You can just out it back to me for the question. I think I noted.
Yeah,
somewhere.
so I think it's the how best. So I think Abraham is an author, and he's asking how we can utilize AI to write his books.
All right. So ChatGPT, right? So I know ChatGPT can be very ChatGPT can be very machine in nature, to be candid, right? So there was this day I just recently, right? I tried, an experiment, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, you use ChatGPT for a documentation, right?" So you need to really be careful when you prompt your ChatGPT. That's like another thing. So there's one thing I would always add to my prompt for ChatGPT is, can you please make your response human? I'm trying to have a conversation with someone. Can you make it more human? I'm trying to create this book for this particular set of people, right? Your target audience. So you really need to be careful around your prompt. So ChatGPT is one tool you can use for your book, but you can't use it for all your content, please. You're a writer, so I think you can use it for probably your topics. You have like 10 topics, right? Introductions. You're not sure of what your topic should look like. So you can just give, the prompt to give you 10 topics I can have on this particular topic, right? ChatGPT can do that for you, or you could just probably give points to the different topics that you have, and you can just build on it. Basically, I would not advise that you use ChatGPT or any other AI tool for the whole content of your book, right? We also need to have that human feel to books that we have these days. And of course, I've been seeing like loads of books, by ChatGPT. But thank you, we have lots of them outside. But you really need to be careful around it. So first is your prompts. You need to be careful around how you prompt these guys. I hope I'm
Thank
able
you very
to answer
much.
that question. Yeah.
Okay, Tammy also has a hands up. Tammy actually works at Buffer, where they recently released an article on how they use AI at Buffer. So yeah, Tammy.
Yeah, so I have a lot of opinions on this topic, but there was a question about plagiarism that was that I think I canceled out. But that was actually what I wanted to answer, and I think it also like aligns with the book, the question about writing your book. So am I still visible? I keep freezing.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, we can hear
you. So one thing that really informed our decision to publish the article was the job applications that we recently had, the job opening that recently had for another content writer position. And we had a lot of people. Like I would even say about 50% of the applications deliver answers written by AI, which when you're applying to be a writer, you probably shouldn't be applying using a tool. Like it should be a human first AI as an assistant. So that was kind of what prompted that. Our perspective at Buffer is that AI is an assistant, not a replacement. Many people were using it as that. And the thing is, people will say, oh yeah, how do you know that this was written by AI? So when I'm writing, I don't use AI to draft content, but I do use it to start the process. So like template type things that are templated, things like presentations, like Somi mentioned, analyzing things from like a machine's perspective that has all this information baked into it that I may not be aware of, right? But it can't think like me. And I think the same applies to anyone writing a book or writing for a B2B company or writing social media content. AI cannot think like a human, so it can't write like a human. The end product of a lot of these tools is very just samey. You start to recognize the patterns. It answers questions.
It's like reading a James Patterson novel. Like
it answers questions in the exact same way every single time. The same structure, the same cadence. There's no flair, and I know that flair is debated. Like, is it actually useful? Where can it be? Like, where is it irrelevant? Where is it relevant? But I don't think AI should ever be involved in the conversation around creativity. Artists are already struggling with people creating content based on their paintings. Like someone created an AI version of the Mona Lisa and said, "Isn't this so much better than the actual Mona Lisa?" And I'm like, no, it isn't. So there are still a lot of things that need to be considered when it comes to how AI is used for content creation in creative processes. But I don't think it should have so much involvement that it starts to replace humans. Like if we ever get to a point where AI is the main source of creative content on the internet, then I'm sorry for humanity. But yeah, I'm biased in that perspective, so I will end there.
Favour, are your hands still up, or was this from last time?
I raised my hand because I wanted to add something to what Ami just said about having flair and creativity. Yeah. I don't even think you should use AI to write any novel at all, because one problem is, well, ChatGPT is trained on certain sources. And as we have mentioned earlier, a lot of data that is generated within Africa is inaccessible digitally. So you are not going to, if you are using it, if it is the main thing generating all your ideas and writing everything for you, you are not getting that non-Western perspective or non-Western flair. Or I think that as Africans, we have something unique to offer the world. And I don't think you'll find it in ChatGPT. You can use it, and I don't even think you should. I think you can use it maybe to edit your grammar, but I think you should just hire a copywriter. But yeah, so they're just all those things. If you type you want to find out information about what is happening in Africa, it will bring Western news sources, articles and journals that have been written by Western commentators, not a Nigerian or an African upcoming struggling university student who is writing passionately. These are all perspectives that will be missing. And I think this is actually an advantage for us, that what we know and what is important to us, even as it is a challenge, isn't visible or accessible outside the continent. So we still have some control over this, and I think we shouldn't diminish or dismiss in order to take advantage of AI's efficiency.
Okay, so we have a little bit more time till the end of the Q&A, and I'd like to use it as an opportunity to bring up Fatima. And Fatima is the head of developer relations and startups for Africa at NVIDIA. And NVIDIA is doing a lot of wonderful things with AI on the continent. And I'm just going to give Fatima a couple of minutes to tell us what she thinks about AI in Africa and what she's doing at NVIDIA to make sure that AI deployment in Africa goes smoothly. Hi, Fatima. Thank you so much for joining us on such short notice. We can't hear you. You're still muted. Okay. We still can't hear you. I can hear a little bit of.
Okay. I was saying I'm at a coffee shop. I literally was just tuning into the panelists had to say. So this is very, very sporadic. But yeah, the panelists have basically said everything that I need to say. Super, super interesting insights regarding the AI for use cases. I think that's where NVIDIA comes in. So NVIDIA essentially has a program called Inception, and we work with about 300 AI startups across the continent. And some of the key use cases that we're seeing is around healthcare and agri-tech, specifically in Nigeria, actually. I've shared in the chat. There's a Nigerian startup called Intron Health, who's doing speech to text, but for African accents. The guy was a doctor, moved to the US, became a machine learning scientist at AWS, and then moved back to start this startup. So I think that's a great example. And then we also see a lot in crop detection using computer vision. And I definitely agree with the panelists who mentioned about education. I think that's the biggest gap that we see. Is technical expertise. But yeah, that's all that I have to say at this point. I just want to listen in today. Super, super interesting insights from all the panelists. Thank you guys so much. And to TechCabal, always great seeing the events that you guys organize.
Thank you so much, Favour, for short notice. And happy copying at the copy shop. Favour has dropped a couple of links, and a couple of other people have also dropped links to AI solutions in the chat box. So if you want to check them out, you can simply scroll up a bit and get it. We have time for one more question, and I'm going to pick this one because it's a bit. So the person says, I hope AI, how can AI in Africa be used to combat corruption, our largest hindrance to a bright future? How would AI help with this age-old problem? Who wants to take that? Sami.
Well, if we allow AI to do it, that's the first place we start from, right? Because AI won't do it by itself. So that would mean that certain things are allowed to happen. So for instance, at ImaliPay, we have, our AI tool doesn't just allow you to access credit and build up a credit score on yourself. We've also been able to deploy our tools into organizations to automate instant reconciliation. And I have to tell you, not every organization likes what we bring. Well, maybe the organization likes it, but not everybody in the organization likes it, right? The first pushback comes from, certain places, and you'll be surprised that even, well, maybe pushback from finance comes from the place of, oh, you want to take my job. But I actually tell them we want to make it easier for you. Why should you spend 30 hours a month sorting things when you should be doing it in 4 hours, just sorting in and out and things like that. I'm just saying the tools are already there, right? Corruption is, a lot of things can help, plugged into AI, blockchain plugged into AI, ledger systems plugged into AI, reconciliation tools plugged into AI. The question is, will we allow those things to do the job that they're supposed to do? And we need to deploy them in the right place at the right time, but expect pushback, because corruption always fights back, right? But if we have the right leaders in the right places and they allow those things to be deployed, I can assure you there are more than enough tools out there to ensure that nothing can be swept under the carpet anymore, right? So that's my quick answer to you.
Favour, Tawanda, do you want to throw some insights into this?
Yeah, I think he covered it pretty much. And it's a human problem. I feel corruption is more of a human problem. The AI tools will help us alleviate it in some way or form, because it creates transparency at a level that's never been seen before. But again, it's up to us to use the power itself.
I think he unmuted him. He muted himself for a bit, but that's all the time we unfortunately have. It's already past 12, and we were supposed to end at 12. Just before I give my vote of thanks and say thank you and all that, I just want to go around the panelists and ask for final thoughts about AI in Africa. So I'll start from the first person on my screen, Bumi.
Come on, am I first? All right, so all right, so my final thoughts really is I think I'll just pick up like a question and just go around it. You don't have to jump right on, oh, I need to do artificial intelligence because the world is saying artificial intelligence, right? You just simply need to look at what you're currently doing, right, and see how you can use artificial intelligence. So don't just say I want to start artificial intelligence. What are you currently doing, and how can I use artificial intelligence to help with what I'm currently doing, basically? And join communities. We have a lot of artificial intelligence communities that you can be a part of, to just learn more, newsletters and all of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bumi. Tammy.
Yeah, I'll speak to, I guess, everyone who is on the continent who might be worried about how AI might affect the creative industry, and say that
I actually have a lot of questions about the creative industry.
So as AI becomes more prominent, becomes used in more articles, for more images, to generate more things, AI models build off what exists on the internet. So those things, as they come, they get like messed up. I'm sure engineer on the call can explain better why AI cannot adapt AI contents. Like after a while, it starts to look very weird. There's like a whole thing around that. So I would say that what you need to keep in mind as a creative is that your human perspective plus your skill is kind of where your value is. People have speculated that we'll start seeing more generated entirely by a human as like a label on articles, and as websites or the internet like begins to identify what is AI generated and what is not a bit better. So we'll start to see those things. This was 100% generated by a human. This was 75% generated by a human. Wherever you can, try to make sure that whatever you're creating is almost, if not perfectly, almost like 98% inspired by you and your story and your perspective. That's where I think we non-technical people can thrive with AI. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Tawanda.
Yeah, I think from my side, looking at it from an engineering perspective, I'd say that right now, AI is our hammer, and a lot of the problems look like nails. So give it a shot, try and see if it works, apply your AI, and if it solves the problem, you solve it. But I think for African problems, we should just try and incorporate AI as much as possible and see where it works and where it doesn't. And just right now, we're in the phase where you should just experiment. Don't be afraid to try something. And you never know when you may come up with a solution that will solve problems for a vast amount of people.
Thank you so much, Tawanda. Favour.
Yes, okay. I want to say that when it comes to my contribution, we have to do with controlling the narrative on regarding AI and thinking about the future that we want to see Africa have, and then think about how AI fits into it. There's a lot of focus on the tech people, the engineers, the programmers and all that. But I think that there's also, when we're talking about culture, there is the room for the social scientists, the artists, the philosophers. These are the people who have something to contribute to regarding our history and our future and how we can bring our unique African perspectives into this. And we need to support these groups of people, and they too need to be aware of the unique contributions they can make to make AI really ours, authentically ours.
And last but definitely not least, Somi.
Thanks, Timmy. I guess my final note would be the future is here. Let's not be ostriches that would put their head in the sand and say, as long as I hit my head, it doesn't affect me. My final word would be stay close to this industry. I expect everybody who's listening to this call today is interested in AI or want to discover more about AI. I would say you're doing the right thing. Stay close to this industry. The industry will continue to grow. The technology will continue to be smarter. Believe it or not, ChatGPT is not the first chatbot attempt at creating something like that in the market. Microsoft did something close to that. Facebook did something close to that. They both failed. Some of the criticisms back then were, oh, it's not human, it's rude, and it's racist. ChatGPT is an improvement to that right now. And ChatGPT is not perfect, but believe me, it will get better. So I'd say stay close to the industry, try and understand how this technology will impact your life and the people around you. And make sure that you're on the right side of it when the time comes. That would be my final note. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Somi, and thank you to all our guests for spending the past 1 hour with us. There's so much to talk about AI in Africa. I mean, we have over 10 more questions here about different sectors in AI, and we wish we could take them, but we really don't have time. And with this, we've come to the end of, Moonshot Conversations. And Moonshot Conversations is basically a mini series of discussions about some of the most critical problems in African tech and what radical solutions for these problems look like. Moonshot Conversation is part of our programs preceding and heralding our new flagship conference, Moonshot by TechCabal. And it holds in October, and it will gather the most audacious players in Africa's tech industry. Now, if you're interested in conversations like this, if you want to network, if you want to join the conversations in a physical and even a virtual space, you can sign up for the waitlist at moonshot.techcabal.com. That is moonshot.techcabal.com. And if you have questions like I said, we already have a lot of questions that aren't unanswered. We're going to take those questions, we're going to send them to the panelists, and they're going to get answers for us, and then we'll share them when we are sharing the recording of the video. Thank you very much again. This has been Moonshot Conversations by TechCabal, and we will see you very, very soon. Thanks, everyone.